see it.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
You're listening to Carousel Sniper Victim, a Dead Glass Design production, with your host, Shaun Jeffery.
Good evening. 3 days after the eruption of Mount St. Helens in southwest Washington state, imponderables dust the air like volcanic ash. 10 persons are known dead, 71 are missing, and one estimate is that it will take more than $150 million just for road and...
Mount St. Helens has erupted again. Initial reports say that a large mushroom-shaped cloud has risen almost 10 miles into the sky. Pilots flying over the volcano said the eruption looked like an atomic bomb.
The 200-meter island appeared on Wednesday in the Ogasawara chain, some 1,000 kilometers from Tokyo, amid a 600-meter plume of volcano.
Officials in Bali, Indonesia are telling people, at least those in a 5-mile radius of this volcano, that they need to leave and leave now. If you look at it, it's obvious why. A massive volcano in this popular tourist destination, spewing smoke and ash, and the plumes are going up over 13,000.
Scientists are releasing a new warning about the threat of a massive supervolcano eruption, like the one under Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. The European Science Foundation has released a 70-page report called Extreme Geohazards, Reducing the Disaster Risk and Increasing Resilience. It references the Yellowstone supervolcano. But scientists say it covers a really enormous reserve of magma beneath the Earth's surface.
Around 1,928 years ago, give or take a year or so, a Roman citizen would make the following statement. In a future generation, when crops spring up again, when this wasteland regains its green, will men believe that cities and people lie beneath? That in days of old their lands lay closer to the sea? Nor has that fatal summit ceased to threaten us. The fatal summit that he is referencing is Mount Vesuvius, the cities beneath, Pompeii and Herculaneum. It really gave me pause to think that not only do we still know of the natural disaster that he was referencing, but even more mind-boggling to me is that his actual words too traversed the long passage of time to make their way to a Smithsonian Institute website, where nearly 2,000 years later, I can retell his words to you. I'm sure the Roman citizen Statius would be pretty blown away by that too. We like to think that the ground beneath our feet is solid. The structures we build on it are permanent and unmoving. The reality is actually quite the opposite. Putting aside the fact that to make one complete rotation in a 24-hour period, a point near the equator of the Earth must move at close to 1,000 miles per hour, 1,600 kilometers an hour. Earth's spin, of course, is not the only motion we have in space. Our orbital speed around the Sun is about 67,000 miles per hour, or 107,000 kilometers an hour. You're doing that speed right now, just sitting still. Add to that, the Sun has an orbit of its own in the Milky Way galaxy. The Sun and the solar system appear to be moving at 200 kilometers per second, or an average speed of 515,000 miles per hour, 828,000 kilometers an hour. So, long story short, just because we've evolved to perceive the ground we're on as solid and unmoving, it really isn't. The actual physical ground you stand on is floating on a boiling mess of molten rock, spinning iron and shifting tectonic plates. Imagine you're a Roman citizen, living in the 1st century AD, enjoying life in the coastal cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Life is good. Wine, food, culture, your society is the cream of the collective human crop at the time. Until one day, in August, the ground itself would spew forth a cascading, superheated wall of death and disaster. An event so devastating, it would be retold for millennia to come. The relief we feel standing on solid terra firma, the safe feeling we have on the ground as opposed to, say, floating in the open ocean or being up at a great height, is really nothing more than an illusion of safety and stability. In the moment, it may be fine. On that day, August 25th, the year 79 AD, or CE, whatever you prefer, you probably would have preferred to have been floating in the open ocean or on top of some faraway mountain. Anywhere other than on the ground beneath Mount Vesuvius. Daybreak, August 25th, the year 79 CE. Under a scorched, fuming, sulphurous sky, a family of 4 struggles down a dark, twisting alleyway. An alleyway that is quickly filling with ash and pumice stones. They're desperately trying to escape the doomed city of Pompeii. To quote the Smithsonian exhibition, A Day in the Life, leading the way is a middle-aged man, carrying gold jewellery, a sack of coins and the keys to his house. Racing to keep up are his 2 small daughters. The younger one has her hair in a braid. Close behind is their mother, scrambling frantically through the rubble with her skirts hiked up. She clutches an amber statuette of a curly-haired boy, perhaps Cupid, and the family silver, including a medallion of Fortune, the goddess of luck. But neither amulets nor deities can protect this family. Even attempting to flee at this point is nothing short of futile. Like thousands of other Romans this morning, the family of 4 are overtaken and killed by an incandescent cloud of scorching gases and ash from Mount Vesuvius. In the instant before he dies, the man strains to lift himself from the ground with one elbow. With his free hand, he pulls a corner of his cloak over his face, as though the thin cloth will somehow save him. The destruction of Pompeii and the nearby coastal town of Herculaneum is undoubtedly history's most storied natural disaster. The ancient Roman cities were buried under layers of volcanic rock and ash, frozen in time, until their rediscovery and exploration in the 18th century. Most have seen images of the plaster casts of the victims, the pets, the pieces of jewellery, all these things, so well preserved by the ash that they were entombed in time. But also preserved was some of the graffiti from the city walls. Outside the bar of Athictus, right of the door, is scribbled in ancient Roman graffiti, quote, "I screwed the barmaid," end quote. On the wall in a nearby street, quote, "Theophilus, don't perform oral sex on girls against the city walls like a dog," end quote. And in the basilica, quote, "Chi, I hope your hemorrhoids rub together so much that they hurt worse than when they ever have before," end quote. Sounds like Pompeii was quite a wild town. The fact that the town was frozen in time, entombed forever in as little as a 24 to 48 hour period, it really does give us a unique insight into their lives. People that seem so foreign and distant when looking back through time really weren't. Those pieces of ancient Roman graffiti could just as easily have been grabbed from any number of Twitter accounts or comment thread from today. The scope of the calamity in AD 79, natural forces transforming bustling areas overnight into cities of the dead, seems unimaginable to most of us in our day-to-day existence. But then try telling that to any one of the people around Indonesia, 1800 years or so later. The most destructive explosion on Earth in the past 10,000 years was the eruption of an obscure volcano in Indonesia called Mount Tambora. More than 13,000 feet high, Tambora erupted in the year 1815 and blasted 12 cubic miles of gases, dust and rock into the atmosphere and onto the island of Sumbawa and the surrounding area. Rivers of incandescent ash poured down the mountain's flanks and burned grasslands and forests in an instant. The ground shook, sending tsunamis racing across the Javan Sea. An estimated 10,000 of the island's inhabitants died instantly. 10,000 people, poof, gone. It's the eruption's far-flung consequences, however, that have most intrigued scholars and scientists. They have studied how debris from the volcano shrouded and chilled parts of the planet for many months, contributing to crop failure and famine in North America, and epidemics in Europe. Climate experts believe that Tambora was partly responsible for the unseasonable chill that affected much of the Northern Hemisphere in the following year, 1816, known as the Year Without a Summer. The gloomy atmosphere that settled around the world may have even played a part in the creation of one of the 19th century's most enduring fictional characters, Dr. Frankenstein's monster. Whether Tambora, Vesuvius, Krakatoa, or any of the other innumerable eruptions over the past few millennia, any eruption would have felt like the end of the world for their respective victims. Our illusion of permanence can, it would appear, be quite easily shattered. We really do think our structures are solid and the ground beneath us is firm. It's anything but. What would happen if, say, today or tomorrow, or a month from now or a year, whenever, if another big one like Mount Tambora, or Yellowstone, or even one of the crazy supervolcanoes like the one that, say, caused the Toba super eruption, suddenly goes pop again? The Toba super eruption occurred about 75,000 years ago at the site of the present-day lake in Toba, Sumatra, Indonesia. It is one of the Earth's largest known eruptions. The Toba catastrophe theory holds that this event caused a global volcanic winter of 6 to 10 years, and possibly a 1,000-year-long cooling period. In 1993, science journalist Anne Gibbons posited that a population bottleneck occurred in human evolution about 70,000 years ago, and she suggested that this was caused by the eruption. A whole bunch of humanity died off right about that time. So, what would the effect be now? Looking at the history of the 1815 eruption at Tambora, since the population in the area has grown drastically since then, if a similar eruption were to take place now, the death toll would exceed the 10 to 12,000 that died directly from the blast by a significantly larger amount. And the worst part was the following, the year without summer, which damaged the whole world's crop production. Since the nature of human life has changed so much in the 2 centuries since the 1815 eruption, starvation would affect millions more than it did then, especially in Western countries in which the vast majority are dependent on the food shipments arriving daily into their cities. I don't know about you, but I certainly don't harvest my own crops anymore. And if you're sitting there like, well, I do. I only eat like organic kale I grow myself that doesn't cast a shadow, #vegan, #blessed. Well, try doing it without summer and the accompanying sunshine that comes with summer. Pretty difficult for a veggie garden to photosynthesize without any decent ambient light around. Back in 1815, most people were farmers, and though they suffered, they had a history of being able to eke out enough for their families. An intercity family or a suburban one, with no experience in personal food production, would be the hardest hit. Within a week, stores would run dry of food and other essentials. Not a fun time. To quote the Roman Proximo, In the end, we're all dead men. Sadly, we cannot choose how or when, but what we can choose is how we decide to meet that end. In our world, there are few people who are most devoted to their profession, who would put their work above life. Despite the fact that people regularly attend management seminars and refresher training, they are often still negligent in their work. But there are exceptions. Such an exception was American photographer Robert Landsberg, who photographed the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. The eruption of Mount St. Helens, which began on the 27th of March 1980, was the event of a lifetime. That was when Robert Landsberg, a 48-year-old American photographer from Portland, Oregon, decided to document it with his camera. During April and early May, he made dozens of trips to the vicinity of Mount St. Helens, hiking and climbing to various vantage points. The morning of May 18 found him near the volcano's peak, seeking just one more eruption sequence to round out his coverage of the whole event. I can't imagine how many people's lives have ended with those last words, just one more. We can't help ourselves. Although he couldn't have known, the eruption was in the process of being preceded by a 2-month series of earthquakes and steam venting episodes, caused by an injection of magma at shallow depth below the volcano that created a large bulge and a fracture system on the mountain's north slope. Essentially, it was very nearly ready to go. Obviously, he knew it was going to erupt. Everyone was expecting it. But no one knows exactly when. The preceding earthquake and outgassing events were the sort of thing he wanted to capture on film anyway. He wasn't some sort of reckless idiot just up there camping. He was there documenting for scientific research. People could use his photography and the events that he'd capture to further grow our understanding of volcanology. The weekend of the eruption, he drove his 1969 Dodge station wagon up the South Fork of the Tootley River to take pictures of the mountain. On Saturday evening, he camped near the volcano and wrote in his journal, quote, "Feel right on the verge of something," end quote. The morning of May 18, he woke early and drove a bit farther up the road. The summit was just over the next ridge, a minute or so by car. At 17 seconds past 8:32 a.m. on Sunday, May 18, the year 1980, a 5.1 magnitude earthquake caused the entire weakened north face of the mountain to slide away, creating in an instant the largest landslide ever recorded at the time. A few seconds after the landslide started, explosions began to burst through the trailing part of the landslide. The resulting blast, which occurred laterally, instead of what you might picture with a standard volcano sort of shooting straight up, St. Helens blew outwards, more sideways. This directed the pyroclastic flow straight down the side of the mountain. Pyroclastic flow. Even the name suggests it's just not a good time. It sounds hot and painful to me. This avalanche of very hot volcanic gases, ash and rock hugged the ground, initially moving at 220 miles per hour. It's 350 kilometers an hour. Pretty fast, right? Wrong. It quickly accelerated to 670 miles per hour, or 1,080 kilometers an hour. And it might have even passed the speed of sound. A central eruption column rose 80,000 feet, 24 kilometers or 15 miles into the atmosphere and deposited ash in 11 US states. At the same time, the snow, ice, and several entire glaciers on the volcano melted, instantly forming a series of large volcanic mudslides that reached as far as 50 miles or 80 kilometers to the southwest of the mountain. Anything in the path of these natural bulldozers was just wiped off the face of the earth. The landslides and pyroclastic flows carried entire forests away and left blank, scorched earth in their wake. By the time the deathly hot, rapidly moving pyroclastic flow hit its first human victims, it was still as hot as 360 degrees Celsius, 680 degrees Fahrenheit, and filled with suffocating gas and flying angular material, rocks, trees, rubble, wildlife even. In the middle of all of this chaos was Robert Landsberg, our photographer. When the mountain exploded, he already had his camera on a tripod, aimed and ready to shoot. And if you remember back to where we last left him, before the eruption, he was close. Way too close. He was only 4 miles or 6.5 kilometers from the mountain's summit when it violently erupted. As the all-engulfing cloud of ash climbed up into the sky and roared out towards him, being so close to the summit, he had a decision to make. Although, really neither option was that enticing. Try to outrun the approaching pyroclastic flow. It wasn't going to happen. No point. Moving at 1,000 plus kilometers an hour, 700-ish miles an hour, at a distance of 4 miles, 6.5 kilometers, so time equals distance over speed, it would take roughly 20 to 22 seconds to reach him. Although I'm sure he wasn't really doing the mental math at the time, more of a, oh shit, that's fast. How far are you going to get in 22 seconds? So what did he decide to do instead? He desperately clicked frame by frame through his lens. He knew there was no possible way to outrun this eruption, so why bother? Instead, he did what he was there to do. He documented the eruption. Once he had spent the roll of film in the camera, he then rewound the film into its cassette inside the camera, careful not to expose it to light, wrenched the camera from its tripod, and stowed it in his backpack. Only a few seconds left. The pyroclastic flow was almost on him. He then crouched down and covered his backpack with his body, hugging it tightly to his chest, hoping he could protect the moments of time he'd captured inside. Deep inside his bag also was his wallet, with his ID. If someone could find it, they could at least inform his family and colleagues. Seconds later, crouched on the ground holding tightly onto his backpack, Robert Landsberg was hit with the full force of the raging pyroclastic flow, and the ensuing ash and debris cloud that came with it. He could do nothing but squeeze his eyes shut and hope it wouldn't hurt too much. Perhaps pray, think of family. Maybe he just calmly accepted his fate. I'm sure people do all manner of different things when they know their death is imminent. "17 days later, his body was found buried in the ash, just near his station wagon. Cause of death? Ash asphyxiation. He was found together with the film that cost him his life. It contained not only telling images of the killing edge of the blast, but also scratches, bubbles, warping, and light leaks caused by the heat and ash. The film was able to be developed though. It provided geologists with invaluable documentation of the historic eruption, photos the like of which had never been seen before. 57 people are known to have died in that day's eruption. Most succumbed to asphyxiation, while several tragically died from burns. Lodge owner Harry R. Truman was buried under hundreds of feet of avalanche material. Volcanologist David A. Johnston was killed, as was Reed Blackburn, another photographer working there for National Geographic. He was found in his car, which itself was buried under at least 6 feet of ash, so running to your car really wasn't going to help you either. If you were on or even near that mountainside that morning, there really wasn't anywhere you could hide. That included the wildlife too. It's estimated nearly 7,000 big game animals, deer, elk, bear, etc., perished, as well as innumerable birds and most of the small mammals in the areas affected by the flows and landslides. The Washington Department of Fisheries estimated that 12 million Chinook and coho salmon fingerlings were killed when local hatcheries were destroyed. Another estimated 40,000 young salmon were lost when, get this, the fish were forced to swim through the turbine blades of the surrounding hydroelectric generators. As reservoir levels along the nearby Lewis River were kept low to accommodate for the possible mud flows and further flooding, essentially, the fish had nowhere else to go except into the intake pipes of the power plants where they were chopped up in the turbine blades. But at least we can say that's all been and gone, right? That was nearly 40 years ago now. We've got like 10,000 years until another or something like that, right? Nope. It's erupted since then already. And since New Year's Day this year, 2018, Mount St. Helens has experienced 40 earthquakes within its vicinity as aftershocks continue every few hours. The most powerful earthquake was a magnitude 3.9, about 5 miles or 8 kilometres from Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens, along with the other mountains in the Cascade Range, in which it is located, will continue to experience active volcanism and deadly eruptions as long as the Juan de Fuca plate is subducting underneath the North American plate. The dense, relatively thin and low-lying Juan de Fuca plate is being pushed against and under the thicker and less dense North American plate. This is due to the continuous spreading and opening of the Pacific Ocean, which has resulted in the Pacific Ring of Fire. Yeah, the Pacific Ocean is actually a giant, ever-growing tear in the Earth's surface, barely holding back the lava. Radical. Those areas in the deep ocean where you find lava close to the surface and explosive outgassing, those are the areas where you'll find hydrothermal vents and all sorts of craziness. The areas on land, where lava and hot gases are closest to bodies of water on a mountain, is where you get hot springs. Relaxing hot springs. The hot springs found in abundance throughout Yellowstone National Park's thermal areas are bubbling cauldrons of steam and boiling water, most of them hotter than 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 70 degrees Celsius, and many of them in the 185 to 205 degree Fahrenheit range. That's approaching 100 degrees Celsius. Due to the elevation of Yellowstone, water boils at about 198 degrees Fahrenheit or 92 degrees Celsius. Less atmospheric pressure, all that science stuff. 22 scalding deaths have been recorded in connection with Yellowstone's hot springs since 1870. All of them known or believed to have involved people who inadvertently fell into the springs through accident or carelessness. All except for one. One guy dove in head first. Self-preservation is one of the most powerful instincts a human being, or any animal, possesses. Human intelligence gives us the ability to detect dangers other creatures may not perceive, but it also endows us with emotions that can sometimes overpower our rational judgment. When someone near and dear to us, a partner, a child, or even a beloved pet, is threatened, our impulse to act can overcome our instinct for self-preservation, and this can lead us to confront death in ways we never otherwise would conceive. On the 20th of July, 1981, 24-year-old David Allen Kerwin from La Canada, California, was driving through Yellowstone's Fountain Paint Pot thermal area with his friend Ronald Ratliff and Ratliff's dog Moosey. At about 1 p.m, they parked their truck to get out and take a closer look at the hot springs. It was at this stage that Moosey escaped from the truck. The little doggo ran towards nearby Celestine Pool, a thermal spring whose water temperature has been measured at over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, 94 degrees Celsius. Basically boiling. You could throw pasta in there and it would be al dente in moments. Moosey the dog hit the edge of the hot spring at full speed and jumped in. The poor dog immediately began yelping. Kerwin and Ratliff rushed over to the pool to try and rescue the terrified dog. Strangely, Kerwin's attitude indicated he was about to go into the hot spring after it. According to bystanders, several people tried to warn Kerwin off by yelling at him to not jump in, but he shouted, "Like hell I won't!" He took 2 steps into the pool and then dove headfirst into the boiling spring. The effect on Kerwin's body was almost immediate. Kerwin swam out to the dog and attempted to take it to shore, but within seconds of entering, he then disappeared underwater, let go of the dog, and tried to climb out of the pool himself. His friend Ratliff helped pull Kerwin out of the hot spring, resulting in second-degree burns to his own feet in the process. And another visitor led Kerwin to the sidewalks away from the hot springs as he reportedly muttered,
"That was stupid. How bad am I? That was a stupid thing to do."
Kerwin was indeed in very bad shape. He was instantly blinded by the scalding hot water, and when another park visitor tried to remove one of his shoes, bad move, don't do that, his skin, which was already starting to blister and peel everywhere, simply came off with the shoe. He sustained third-degree burns to 100% of his body, including his head. He died the following morning at a Salt Lake City hospital. And, sorry to report, Moosey the doggo did not survive either. Perhaps David Allen Kerwin didn't realise just how hot the thermal springs really are. Perhaps he didn't consider the deadly effects submersion in water of such temperatures would have on him. Or perhaps just blind emotion drove him to act without taking even the briefest moment to consider his own safety. Foolish, brave, blind emotion, whatever, he did it and it cost him his life. Again, what we perceive as our safe, solid Earth is really just the thin crust that can hide a hellish world beneath. Plates move, boundaries shift, rivers swell up and then subside and sometimes shift their course entirely. Mountains of hard granite stone are forced into the sky and then slowly turn to sand. The only constant thing is change. We would be wise to remember that. Those that survive the harshest realities of natural disasters are generally those that are best suited to adapt to the change that natural disasters bring. Hopefully, like the Roman citizen Statius, our civilization or some form of it will still be around in another 2,000 years, and they can heed the warnings we leave behind. But you never know. It could easily all blow away. Our collective knowledge could blow away from some natural event or disaster, or, more likely, our knowledge we've gathered over the centuries could be blown away from the winds of some stupid, irrationally started nuclear war. Not to be all doom and gloom or anything, we might learn to adapt and figure it all out too. Humans have been a pretty tenacious species. We've adapted to change this far. Either way, though, the Earth itself will more than likely be fine. It's done just fine for 4.8 billion years, but it's just whether we can still live on it. One final quote, but this time from the old book about the guy that the Romans put to death on that torture device that we now hang on jewellery and have up on the walls. You know, the book with the magic and sand wizards. By the sweat of your brow, you will have food to eat until you return to the ground from which you were made. For you were made from dust, and to the dust you will return. Technically true, we're made from stardust, atoms, and we will all end up back in that soup of atoms that is the cosmos eventually. Just hopefully it comes from some more peaceful end, rather than boiling hot springs skin slippage scenarios or a giant roaring hell cloud tearing its way down the side of a mountain and suffocating everything it touches before entombing it in ash. No thanks. You can keep that sort of death.
and it makes a fiery ring. Bound by wild desire, I fell into a ring of fire. I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames went higher, and it burns, burns, burns. The ring of fire, the ring of fire. I fell for you like a child. Oh, but the fire went wild.